the beacon for the nation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to The Real Talk. I'm your host Abdulhakeem Kigen. Thank you so much for making time this evening. Today we'll be talking about the rising cost of education in Kenya with a focus on post-secondary education. Now this week, the Vice Chancellor of the oldest and the largest university in Kenya, that is the University of Nairobi, came out with a new fees structure. And this new fee structure has an increase of the tuition fees for students who are in the parallel program, popularly known as Module 2 or self-sponsored, as well as for some. This increase is up to 118%. Now, there has been a lot of reactions from the students themselves, members of professional bodies, and also members of the public at large. This has sparked a conversation about the cost of education in Kenya. Are students getting value for their money? Is there a return on investment in education for a student? What in all? Now, to help me dissect Thank you. Welcome. Thank you so much for making time this lovely evening. Remember to send your comments and questions on WhatsApp at 0798 974 747, 0798 974 747, as well as at HorizonTV on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So let's dive right in, okay? So according to Professor Stephen Kiama, who is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Nairobi, he says that the new fee structure is consistent with the Universities Act of the year 2012. And the University Act of 2012 stated, put the fee structure into 14 categories of how, the fees is to be administered for the various courses that are being offered in Kenya. The clusters program, that is. And his argument is that it is consistent with that. It has duly followed the University Act of 2012. But again, this is 118% increase. This is more than double. Is this justified? I'll start with you, Mr. Wainaina.
Thanks, Kigen, and the reason as wherever you are. I think we need to first lay the foundation about education. And I must start by saying this, that education is the most powerful and empowering tool in the world. It creates a whole human being, an all-round human being. It is the one that creates or bridges the inequalities and iniquities. It is the one that addresses your human capacity and realization of your potential as a human being. And two, that's first aspect. The second aspect is about this, that the Constitution of Kenya under Article 43 underscores the importance of education, right to education, as a Bill of Rights. And there is a way under the same Bill of Rights, you cannot limit a right until in a certain way. And education is one of those rights. The third aspect about this is that there are international instruments, and more importantly, the Sustainable Development Goals 4. It talks about inclusive and quality education. It also talks. Then you go to the international conventions around education and all that. One consistent theme around all that about education is the question about inclusion and quality of education. So, if we are going to discuss the question about what the university in Kenya is, the Nairobi University, and I don't think it's just the Nairobi University alone. You saw just the other day, it's called Masidamolo University.
Yes.
They almost transferred themselves from being a university to a TVET. Basically, they made the identity, but they are trying to come up. They are looking at how the challenges that the universities are going to face, and therefore if I want to discuss the whole what Professor Kiama is trying to do, I will discuss him within the context of 4 parameters. 1, education, access, and inclusion. Is what the decision policy making they are making, are they addressing the question about access and inclusion? 2, the performance. I know they are doing costing based on what they call the differential unit costs.
Yes.
That's the one we are concerned for 14 and I confirm. So the question about performance, and you have to look at education in a more broad way, and how that addresses the whole question about the quality of education people are getting, and how the kind of outcomes that are coming out of that education, basically. So you need to ask that question. Then the third parameter I must look at it is education and innovation.
Yeah.
How much innovation in terms of education investment are we getting?
Yeah.
Because are we still dealing with education from a very traditional way of doing it? And then final parameter, which is now what they're emphasizing on, is the finance. Yeah. Because I think they have gone more into finance. Yeah, they are looking more about cost cutting. Remember this, the government did cut in the budget 26% of the entire funding of education. Yeah. So you have to look at the finance. The capitation. The capitation and all that. It's not even about capitation, by the way. It's a number of other things. And then we should be able to ask the question, how do universities generate their money and to run? Yeah. Because that's for me is the basic question. And I must tell you this, and I hope your listeners will get this very clear. The problem we have in our universities, they are state dependent. Yeah. They fully depend on the state, and for that reason, you find that the universities themselves have moved away from becoming major resource mobilizers to support their program, their education system, and all. Remember, the primary goal of university is teaching and research and development. Yeah, yeah. So if you look at broadly the most advanced universities in the world and the system in the world, they actually have 3 ways of raising the money. 1, and in fact it forms the largest, is what they call alumni funding. Yeah. If, for instance, you are coming from Faculty of Law, Education, Agriculture, you have so many alumni, people who are in industry, people who are in, they became big. They are applying back to that, and a dean of a faculty mobilizes millions and millions of money to support their faculty, coming from those alumni. And in fact, that forms the single largest investment. When you talk about Yale, you're talking about Harvard, you're talking all those universities, alumni becomes one of the biggest funding. The second one is special grants from both government and from corporate world. And the corporate world is the single biggest investor in terms of universities, because that's where you generate products. This is where you do research. You're coming up with products. So they invest heavily on that. Government require universities to generate knowledge and a lot of policies that becomes now the drivers of. So government gives universities grants for research. That's that aspect. The final aspect about it is now what our universities are dependent on, the taxpayer. Yeah. But the taxpayer money is actually limited and has a very small scope from these big universities, basically. Yeah. So if you want to look at you should look at the bigger picture, what Kiama is trying to do, and ask the question, is Kiama addressing the structural problem that has been inflicting the universities for all these years, or is he just addressing one aspect of the problem?
Thank you so much, Mr. Wainaina. Certainly, a point to take home is the fact that, you know, the best universities globally, they generate most of their revenues by working together with corporates, so by doing research and knowledge generation, and that's how they make their income. But again, when we talk about the cost of education, many people tend to speak just about, you know, the fees that people pay, the tuition fees and the likes. But there is another cost. There is a hidden cost. There is a cost. Mr. Wainaina has talked about the quality of education in Kenya. There is room for improvement, certainly. You'll agree with me on that. So there are costs that students bear just because of the low quality of education in our universities and tertiary institutions. And these are costs like the time that you spend. Sometimes you're supposed to complete a degree in 4 years, you end up completing in 5 years. That's wasted time. You've missed something. There's a cost there, you know. And then when you are educated in something and you are you're educated to get irrelevant skills or not get sufficient skills, and you walk into a job market and you can't fit, that is also a cost. So, Mr. Nyagah, kindly speak to this.
I think before we talk about that, I would just like to, it's good to let Kenyans know where we have come from when the idea of fee increment is concerned. Before, the training of any program at the university level was at an average cost of 120,000. That's how it was. Then with time, the issue of now grouping of the clusters that were formed. The reason why the clusters were formed was because of accountability. Before, the government will give universities money, but there was zero accountability, where you find money was given depending on the number of students who are in such universities, each at 120,000, but there was zero accountability. And this is the reason why the government thought maybe it's good for us to come with a different model, and they developed the differentiation unit cost. And this cost divided the courses offered at the university into 14 clusters. And each cluster has a specific amount of money one is supposed to pay. So with time, you find that the STEM courses are given higher amount of money than the social sciences courses. And this now led to the what we call the universities which depended on this money, the 120,000, they had now to look more on ways in which they can raise their own money. Because if you find universities, many of them or most of them are offering less STEM courses. And the STEM courses are being given more money. Most of them are focused on the social science courses, which attracts less amount of money. Now, the universities have been struggling to pay professors. You find a professor under the SRC, Salaries and Remuneration Commission, there is a certain amount of money they are supposed to be paid. And now the universities are not able to pay this. With this, the differentiation equation, the differentiation unit costs, the universities have been complaining that they are not able to cater for the cost, the running cost of the entire university. Before, they brought the issue of parallel programs, where students who attained a C+ and did not qualify under the to be part of the government-sponsored students, they were now required to pay more money to the universities. That is what we call self-sponsored programs, and this was one of the key revenue resources for the universities. Now, with the changing of the education, the requirements to join the education, the government thought it's good now to sponsor all the students who attain C+ and above. So the issue of the parallel program, in a way, was wiped off by the government. So the universities currently are struggling to raise their money.
Yeah.
And now this is the reason why you see they are now trying to increase the fee. At 100 and is it 218%?
Yeah, sure.
That is why now you see they are doing this. But basically, when you look at this, we are in a COVID season. Many people have lost jobs.
Yeah.
Parents are struggling to raise fees. Now, when you double or when you triple, because I think the fees are going to rise from 200, a minimum of 200,000
to 600,000.
Yeah. That is tripling. Parents are there, they are suffering. In fact, most of them raising money just to afford the basic needs like eating, shelter, and all that is a problem.
Yeah.
Now, when you increase this is forcing people to get out of school.
Yeah.
Most are not able to afford the school fees.
And you've just mentioned about unemployment, people who lost their jobs, during this COVID crisis. And, according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, they say that 5 million Kenyans lost their jobs in the year 2020. That's the last year. And in addition to that, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics also places the unemployment rate in Kenya for the youths at 38.9%. which is very high, with the definition of the youth, of course, being the ages of 18 to 35. Now, youths have gone to universities, they have gone to TVETs, they've graduated. Now, their end goal, where they're supposed to end, is in the job market. So why are we having 38.9% unemployment rate for the youths. Is it because what the skills that they gain in the universities and in the tertiary institutions do not match what is required at the job market? Or is it because that we are producing exam writers and not problem solvers? You know, as Albert Einstein said, that education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. Mr. Wainaina, please shed light on this.
You know, I want to pick something from where Nyagah left, and there's something very interesting about the kind of education. Remember the things I talked about, access and inclusion. One thing we are going to do with this, I can assure you this: education has become very elitist. It's going to be, and you see, and it's going to have a very serious consequences. On one hand, the government has come up with a policy of massive transition. On one hand,
yeah, the 100%
transition,
primary to high
schools and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Today, as you're speaking, we are dealing with a crisis in secondary schools.
Yeah, absolutely.
Today, I'm a parent. I know what I'm talking about. The crisis in secondary schools is just out of, it's just that people don't want to talk about. Right? Now, here is where government, if you look at the investment the government is putting, in fact, if you want to just do a basic calculation,
yeah,
this is how the budget, education budget looks like. The single largest, the budget for the last financial year for education alone was, in terms of the actual allocation, was 498 billion shillings. TSC took the chunk of that money. In fact, it took about 50% of that money.
The employer?
It is the employer, the TSC. Because the TSC deals with teachers from secondary, primary, and then tertiary, part of the tertiary and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Then the next university only got about 20% of that budget. Then from there is the primary and secondary schools on this computation they do.
So are they able to deliver what the market requires with such kind of funding?
Now this is where I'm coming to. We are facing a serious challenge of quality assurance and the standards in primary school and secondary schools. All right? Now, that problem does not end there. It actually, today, one of the biggest challenges we are facing is the quality and the standards of education being done at the universities. In fact, it's a very big challenge.
Yeah.
Right? So, if we are going to talk about, remember the way I said how the investment should look like in terms of if you want to move away from to get our university where it should be.
Yeah.
So if you are going to look at the education system we have, we must ask ourselves certain hard questions. And I'll give you an example. If you read, and we are talking about young people,
yeah, if
you read Article 55 of the Constitution, it's about youth. Do you know it talks about 4 important things? The first, at Article 55A, the first thing it talks about is access to education and training. Now here it is, you are making education become so expensive at the university level.
And it's a constitutional right.
It's on one hand, at the Bill of Rights, Article 45,
yeah,
it's there. At the SDG 4, the education is there. If you come now to youth, the young people are talking about, Article 55 is about youth, and the Article 55 subsection A is about access to education and training. Now you're making education inaccessible. This Article B talks about, C actually, of that same article, talks about employment and economic opportunities.
Yeah.
When I began the program, I said, education is the most powerful and empowering.
Absolutely.
You see that?
As Mandela said.
Now, here we are. The question about access to education and training and access to employment opportunities. Now, if you make it so hard for people to get the prerequisite skills and training and the knowledge they need, then how are those people going to be part and parcel of economic productivity? And that takes me to one thing: the character of our education and our model of our economic structure.
Absolutely.
If you discuss the two, the model, our education system and our economic system are premised and based on one single thing: consumption.
Yeah.
consumption. So even everybody who is in university today,
yes,
if you ask them, you had it here, and that's why I talk about quality and standard.
Yeah.
It is about consumption. Those people are aspiring to get out here and consume what's available.
Yeah.
You see, that it speaks directly to, it starts to raise questions about the model of education system we have, the kind of teaching and scholarly work being done at the university, and the final outcomes that we get. And then that, you have to relate that one to the structure and the character of the economic we have.
You've actually spoken my mind. You know, initially when you mentioned about the 100% transmission from primary to high school, I remembered reading a while back that, you know, economic and policy commentators have said that the current unemployment problem that we are having with the youths who are actually qualified, they've gone to post-secondary institutions, you know, they have degrees, they have papers, as they like to call it, you know. So the Kibaki administration did not put in tandem economic systems when they offered free primary education, because when you offer free primary education, this means that many people will enroll to school, then they'll move on to high school, then they'll move on to tertiary institutions. Now there was supposed to be an economic structure and system strategy that is in tandem with this, so that it is expecting that after a while we will have graduates. How will we absorb them? And now we are having an even bigger problem with the 100%, you know, transmission.
In fact, let me tell you this, and this is what the listeners need to understand. If you go to the government books, it records every year our labor market expands.
Yeah, the output.
Yes, actually that's what it does. Whether it is from children who dropped at class 8, from 4, college, and universities.
Yeah.
The labor market expands, but where is that labor? This is not a productive labor.
Yeah.
So that's why this country has a massive labor that has two problems: underemployment and underpaid.
Yeah.
That explains why today you find that you have so many graduates who have just come out. I was just reading today's papers where they were talking about a graduate who has been maize roasting, you know.
Yeah.
And now he got somebody to get him an internship. There's a basic thing like internship. Now that tells you the kind, we have a massive expanded labor market.
Yeah.
But majority of it is underemployed, undertrained, underskilled,
or totally unemployed.
So, and I can tell you this, where I work, I participate a lot in so many interviews.
Yeah.
And I go sit down there, you ask a student a basic question, and you find the struggling that student is having, that potential employee is having in answering certain basic questions. And you start asking, going back and asking, what character, what sort of quality of education are we carrying out in terms of the kind of training we are having?
Daniel, allow me to engage you on this.
Yeah.
You're a policy expert, and what we've been hearing from Mr. Wainaina is, you know, we need a restructure of our universities and the way they do things. You know, you find that, as he stated earlier, that the main objective why universities were started was actually for knowledge generation and research. But then you cannot have universities for training of operational skills. Let me give a basic example. You know, if you want to be a chef, do you need to go to university or do you need to go to a culinary school? Because the objective of a university is knowledge generation and, you know, research. So, and most of the things there tend to be theoretical and the likes. That was how universities used to be back in the day, when they were actually functional, as many people would say. So Daniel, do you feel that we should have this shift where we should restructure, and that some courses should actually be moved out of universities and into special schools, particularly courses that are teaching about operational skills?
I think that is something that we were having a discussion sometimes back, and it's very important that the government needs to focus or needs to think on how best we can work on the education sector and see how we are going to equip students with the necessary skills. From my experience, I've seen that most of the people who go to universities, people are examined based on their ability to remember what they were able to read and learn or what they were taught in class. But when it comes to the practical bit of it,
there's a mismatch.
Are usually zero. And I've seen people, I've worked with several organizations, and there is one thing I realized. I had an experience of someone who had a first class degree, but when it came to the practical part of applying what he learned in school, the output was almost zero. So I used to wonder, how are you able to score a first class, but yet when it comes to the ground, as they say, vitu ni different. Yeah, you find someone has done a degree in computer science, but when it comes to deal with IT and computer things, this person has maybe to Google or refer to something else. So what the universities or the education sector in Kenya is more emphasis on the theoretical part and not the practical part. And that is now why we think, or we need to focus now on expanding the practical training of all courses at the universities. So far we know there is a focus on maybe a few courses that maybe you find there, the medicine, a few engineering, but still you can see despite having that, they have put more emphasis on the theoretical part, that in the country, you can see the mega projects that are being carried in the country. We have to import skills from China and the rest of the world.
Are we importing because we don't have the skills in Kenya, because we lack the skills, or are we importing just because, you know, in the contracts and the employment has to come from abroad?
From my own experience, I think the people who come from the university are what we call half-baked. Yeah, yes, they have the theoretical part, but when it comes to the practical part, we have a problem. We saw the other day there was a government project that was given to a Kenyan. The project took more than a year to be completed, and when it was compared, if it was given to the people, the foreigners, it would have taken like 3 months to complete. And this is something that we need to put emphasis on, the practical training, the training of people to get the skills that they need, so that when you go to the job market, they can easily adapt to this. And another thing I saw, we have this, what the government has brought, the internship project, the internship program that is meant to take the students who are clearing their universities and colleges, where they are put into training for 1 year. There has been a public outcry that these people, once they are in the jobs, their focus is mainly on the social media. You find someone is in the job, instead of doing what he's supposed to do, is there in
there
Facebook,
something else,
WhatsApping, TikToking, all these things.
Yeah. Now, Daniel, hold that thought right there. I'm actually, you've mentioned something very important about practical skills, and I know Mr. Wainaina is, his mind is already thinking about TVETs. We'll be having the conversation about TVETs after the short break. Let's continue with the conversation. Send your questions and comments at Horizon TV on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Stay with us. We'll be right back after the break.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Idul Adha ni msimu wa kuchinja wanyama na kushirikia pamoja kijamii. Horizon TV inachukua fursa kutuunganisha katika kufanikisha sadaka hii. Tunashirikiana nawe kuwapa mayatima na watu wasiojiweza tabasamu kwa mchango na ukarimu wako. Uwe mtu binafsi au kampuni, nambari zetu za mchango ziko wazi kuwekeza katika akhira yako. Kupitia paybill namba 567704 na akaunti Horizon TV, tuweze kufanikisha Idul Adha kwa wale tunaowajali. Kwa maelezo zaidi usisite kuwasiliana nasi kupitia info@horizontv.co.ke.
قال تعالى في محكم تنزيله بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
Ni nasaha kutoka pwani.
هذا الدين قال الله قال الرسول قال الصحابة هم أولو العرفان. انتهى.
Ile kuongoza kwenye njia iliyonyoka.
Sikizeni hadithi hii ya Mtume alayhi salatu wasalam.
Hakuna atakayeweza kumfungia mtu mlango ambaye Mwenyezi Mungu aliyemfungulia.
Kuimarisha imani yako.
ثبت قلوبنا على دينك وعلى طاعتك.
Ungana na mashekh wetu kutoka pwani kwenye mimbar.
Mimbar zinamwakilisha Mtume sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Ni Jumamosi na wakati saa 3 usiku katika Horizon TV, runinga uipendayo. Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. I'm your host Abdulhakeem Kigen, and today we are talking about the rising cost of education in Kenya, with a focus of post-secondary education. And with me is Mr. Wainaina here and the very able Mr. Nyagah. Now, Mr. Wainaina, you mentioned earlier that you have been in areas where you have conducted interviews and you have been a recruiter. Now, I find that there is a big contradiction. Earlier my brother Daniel had mentioned about TVETs, and the practical skills that they give to the students. And you'd find many employers, they argue that, TVET guys are actually more equipped, more practical, they can get the job done more than even guys who are studying masters. But again, that is just in word but never in deed, because it doesn't reflect when it comes to job advertisement. Why is it that when jobs are advertised, masters is actually no longer an added advantage, but it's actually the principal requirement? So why is it that on one hand we are saying that the TVET guys can actually get the job done more than the masters guys, but in real sense when you're applying for a job, the masters is actually what is on top of the list? So my question is this the reason why we find many people going for masters just to meet the basic requirements for jobs?
In this country, we have a problem of investing more in form rather than the substance.
Quite an interesting statement that is.
No, that's how it is. Anything we spend more on the form. And I want to give you an example. And I want to use the Kiama example. Kiama is giving us the form, the structural and administrative structure of the university. so that he can cut costs. Because according to him, the university is top heavy with bureaucracy. It is top heavy with people who are just basically there, but in terms of productivity, there is none. So he is dealing with the form. You get me?
Yeah.
But the core business of the university is the substance, the education, the knowledge, the skills, the research. Where is Kiama's blueprint? But that's a core business.
Yeah.
Because the question you're asking me is, why would a guy, and by the way, for information, today we have many graduates who have gone back to TVETs. Actually, we have so many graduates who are now, as you're speaking, in TVETs.
But still, when it comes to job advertisements, you know, masters is still predominant.
The question is this. That's why I begin the statement that we deal more with the form, not the substance. And a good employer is the employer who looks at the substance. Mm-hmm. In fact, look at the people, the phone you are holding, the equipment you are using, all those. Look at the kind of characters who have innovation. Bill Gates, Steve, all those guys. Look at them. These are guys who hardly even had a formal education.
They had a formal education, but they stepped out of the tertiary education.
Yes, I know that. But look at the kind of world they are living. The kind of who are guys who are now driving, who are now dealing with this space and all that of the investment. And the point I'm making is this: the universities should understand their role. It is good to cut costs. It is good to have a more and well. The structural and administrative reforms you are carrying out must address themselves to the core business of the university.
Yeah.
Which Kiama has not given us, and not just Kiama. And that's why I think the person responsible for the university, Masida University, that guy, whoever came up with that idea of this Massachusetts Institute of Technology, is a university.
MIT.
Right? It's one of the best in the world.
Yeah, in Boston.
You see, but it has this breeding of universities, a degree and a diploma or a technical thing.
Yeah.
The reason why that's so important is this: by the time you are getting out of a university, right? You are not just about some. You are not just anybody. You are a person who has been developed, cooked well,
given the powers to read.
Not just the power to read, but even. And by the way, I have told people this.
Yeah.
And if you look at the people who drive the world, majority of those guys are people who have done arts.
Yeah.
Political scientists, economists, all those guys are the new guys who drive this world.
Yeah.
The thing is this: we should ask ourselves, what is the quality and the standard of education are we offering in our universities?
Now,
so what is the connection between the reforms Nani is carrying out and that?
Yeah.
And before I want to say this, and I want to say it public so that people understand, it is not the responsibility of the universities to defend government policy and articulate government policy. Universities are distinct institutions of knowledge, education, research, and development.
Yeah.
It is not their work to speak on behalf of government. In fact, sometimes you listen to a university professor and you ask, am I dealing with a... Because the essence is this. The essence is that we try to connect. If you don't connect the form you are trying to create, so that how is this form delivering the substance we want?
Absolutely.
Because that's so even when you're looking at the cost of education, for instance.
Yeah.
And earlier on I talked about how we are making education to become extremely elite, and why access is going to be a big problem for this country, and how many people will be defranchised, right? How many young people will never get that education and all that kind of thing. The thing here is simply this: that I don't stay far from Kabeta Technical, where I stay. And I like interacting with a lot of those students. Yeah. Can I say something about that technical?
Before you tell me that,
you asked me about that question about TVET.
We've seen a different trend. We've seen a different trend where, as you've actually mentioned, you alluded to Bill Gates, who is the founder of Microsoft, and that he dropped out of school and the likes. And in the recent past, there has been a lot of question marks about education and tertiary education and degrees in particular. Now, Daniel, from your understanding, is degrees relevant and important? Because we've seen companies like Google, Apple, IBM, scrapping out the degree requirement in their job applications. Is degree still relevant?
I will answer that with two answers. First of all, is degrees, in my opinion, they are good. But what we need to do is to emphasize on the practical bit of it. We need to shift from focusing on the theoretical part and now focus on the practical part of it. I've seen that when organizations advertise for jobs, basically mostly on interns, they pick you. They don't care about the kind of course you have done. They go and train you afresh. Yeah, and that is what Google are doing. They pick anyone, as long as you are a university graduate, they take you, they train you, give you the necessary skills, and now you're able to perform. You see, they are driving on equipping you with the skills that you need.
Yeah.
You see, so even at the universities, what we need to do is to focus on the practical part, equipping the students with the right skills. And the reason why you see people from TVET are doing far much better compared to the universities is you can visit every TVET institution in this country. They have a laboratory, they have workshops, all this. But how many universities in Kenya have these workshops? You can visit all these recently opened universities. All of them. You find some of them are offering construction, architecture, but they have no workshop. No, they have no any laboratory or anything.
Those skills that you've mentioned, yesterday we marked the World Youth Skills Day 2021. And, you've talked about skills and universities and TVETs. But then, there are people who are feeling left out of these conversations. There are people who obtained their skills, in the informal, in an informal manner, sort of, so to speak. And let me give you an example. So someone just drops out of school in class 4 and he joins, might be a friend or a relative who does welding, and he learns how to weld, he grows his or her craft, and he or she gets to a point where they open their own welding shop, and they start doing contracts, and the likes, and they end up very successful. So these are people who didn't go through the formal system of gaining skills. Do you feel that it's time that we recognize and appreciate them? Let me start with Mr. Wainaina.
It's not just recognizing and appreciating them. Let me tell you this. If you look at our informal sector that employs 85% of our workforce in this country, in fact, 85% of our employment is in the so-called Juakari. If you go there, you find that the kind of innovation, the kind of things being done there are massive, right? And there is a massive disconnection between our learning institutions, particularly our TVETs and the universities, and this sector. Remember one thing I said earlier on. I said that when we come to looking at education in terms of productivity and the kind of graduates that are getting out, I said one way of universities earning income is the connection between the industry and the university.
Absolutely.
Is it? That's what I say. Now, where is the connection in this country between the university and the industry? Because if now we are talking about Juakari, who is supposed to invest massively with the Juakari people?
University.
It's university, is it? Because that is where now university will be sitting down with these people, putting in a lot of research, a lot of work, a lot of, getting now the access to education and training comes in. So you find that most of those guys would want to have a very simple trainings, gaining more skills, more knowledge in a very simple, please don't interfere with their innovation, but they get more knowledge. So you find that they advance what already they have innovated. You get me? If you go and you get, and that's, if you go to India, for instance, or China, what are they doing? It it's a direct link between the universities, the TVET, and the industry itself.
Yeah.
The industry find it so important to invest in the TVETs and the universities. They give them charge. Come train our people, we'll pay you.
Yeah.
But you are not interfering with their day-to-day learning. But the university generates a lot of resources out of that.
Absolutely.
Now, the thing is, and I'll give you another example. Today, agriculture is devolved.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
How many universities are investing in research and development, partnering with the county governments on agriculture productivity? Agriculture in this country has stagnated for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
No new research, no new development around agriculture, no technical support on the ground. Where are the universities? Counties, one of the single largest source of revenue for the universities would be partnering between the county government and the universities on the ground to improve agriculture productivity. So you need to look at this. And for me, when I sit back, and I'll be very keen to look at it from what sort of skills and knowledge are universities investing in different sectors of the economy for them to be able to generate the resources they are struggling with. You might find actually,
Yeah.
if for instance the faculty of, say, agriculture alone, in a specialization,
Yeah.
you find that there are so many industry people who would want to invest in that sector because there are so many investment that are coming with it. There's a lot of, it's called a multiply effect.
Multiply effect. Now,
that.
now you've mentioned about, the skills that are being, are being produced from the universities and the knowledge, and how they relate to the market. Now, the World Economic Framework says that 65% of children entering primary school now will end up in jobs that don't exist at the moment.
Yes.
That tells you one thing, that our education system has to be very dynamic. It has to be paranoid, actually, to be able to cater for the market. Now, Daniel, what are the things that our education, our educators, the administrators of our education system should do to ensure this dynamism, so that it's not left behind? So that as I've just mentioned, a kid that is entering class 1 now will end up in a job that currently doesn't exist. How do you prepare this person for a job that actually doesn't exist?
The Vision 2030, one of the key things that was considered was the issue of technology advancement. And with the coming of the COVID, really brought up this idea why we need to focus more on developing the technological development of any institution. Just to let you know, one of the key reasons that I've seen has been a great failure on why universities are not able to invest in the current job, equipping students with the necessary skills, and also focus on what the kind of jobs that people, the researchers are predicted might be there.
Yeah.
Is corruption. Money has always been there. These people have been looting a lot of money, billions of money. We saw what happened to Masai Mara University, the Masai East. Money have been lost continuously over the years. And one of the key things is that universities administration, the head of universities administrations, have been basically what we call political rewards.
Yeah.
Where you find someone who has been loyal to a certain politician.
So your appointment is not based on merit.
Yeah, it's not based on merit. And when you get to this office, your target is one: steal as much as possible, because you have the immunity.
Yeah.
You have the immunity.
Yeah,
nobody will follow you.
Yeah.
You're connected to a very senior politician.
Yeah.
And now this is what is eating the universities. You find this money that is being lost would have been invested in doing research, providing workshops and laboratories that are necessary in doing all this necessary research to equip the students with the necessary skills needed in the future. And just to add on that, we have seen what has been happening under the CBC. You have seen the introduction of the new curriculum.
Yeah.
And also there has been that emphasis on now embracing the technological aspect and bring it starting from the primary all the way to the secondary and all this.
Yeah.
We have seen the introduction of online teaching. Now, In 2013, yeah, there was the promise of having students with laptops.
Yeah.
It's now how many years?
It's
nine years.
Yeah.
Where are these laptops? Assuming that this is something that was implemented then.
Yeah, the impact would have been phenomenal.
Yeah, we could not be facing the challenges they are facing now when the students were at home.
Yeah, with COVID,
with
the online
COVID.
learning.
Yeah, if this is something that was implemented, I thought it was called the Digi School program,
Yeah.
something of that sort, where students, all the schools were able to access electricity. Those are kind of the things that were being done. But still, because of corruption, which has been eating our country, they stole all the money. And here we are 10 years down the line, we are still saying we want to focus on digital. I'm sure even 2022 they will also bring the issue of laptops and everything. And again, the teachers themselves, beginning from the primary, the secondary and this, most of them are analog. Yeah? They don't know anything to do with the online teaching and all these things. In fact, most of the teachers now, even if you give them a smartphone, they are struggling just to make a call. They are not that well equipped to do this training. And it's something that the government needs to invest on.
Yeah.
We need to train our teachers,
Absolutely.
the teachers, beginning from the primary, because now we need to prepare these children from the early ages. They need to get all this. And now, you see, a child is born today. After 2 years, if you give this child a phone, they are able to operate this phone.
Very quickly,
Yeah? But now the teachers don't have these skills.
So there's a huge capacity building gap.
Yeah, it's not just about, there are two things that Nyagah here has raised. One, and as Kiama and other university professors administrators start doing these reforms, Nyagah has asked a question: what exactly is the role of government in governance of universities? That's number one. Number two is that what lessons have we learned with COVID? Because if nobody has learned out of COVID in the education sector, I think we will never run. Today, as we're speaking, today, we are here in this studio with your listeners listening. Do you know the kids who are starting Form 4 on July 26th?
27.
They'll do the exam on March next year. Now, the question is this: where is the learning? Where is the education that is being, is it possible? And within a 1 year, you do 2 exams. So there is a fundamental question we should be able to ask. And for me, as a concluding remark is this: we must ask the hard question about our education system we have, the quality of education we have, the standards of education we have, and what sort of education system do we want? Do you want an inclusive, quality education with performance, and how we are going to finance the whole of that? And then end up with one question: what sort of a child do we want? We do not want an elite education in this country, and we do not want a privatization of education in this country, because that's what exactly they are doing. And for me, if we go that route, I can assure you, education will become a very, very costly thing, and will completely alienate majority of the population in this country.
Okay, well, on that note, this was a very interesting conversation. I would really have loved to continue this, but because of time, we'll have to end it here. Thank you so much, our viewers, for staying with us. And as Mr. Wainaina has mentioned, COVID really exposed the inequality that is there in our education system. My final note is this: let us not build our societies based on our incomes. In that, if there is the public education is poor, because you have the money, you take your child to private institutions. Because the public health sector is dilapidated, what you do is that because you have money, you get an insurance, you move to a private hospital. The idea of not caring just because it doesn't affect you, because you have the money, is what is causing us all these problems. So again, I repeat, let us not build our societies based on our income. Let's continue this conversation at Horizon TV on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook. Thank you so much for staying with us this evening. I'm your host, Abdulhakeem Kigen, and until next time, stay safe, keep it Horizon TV. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.